The head of MI6, Sir Richard Moore, has called on Russians to join the British secret intelligence services to spy on Russia for the UK. He said that if they join, he will keep their secrets safe and work collaboratively to end Russia's bloodshed in Ukraine. Well, to talk us through this remarkable move from MI6 and to get us up to date with the latest news from the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Alan Mendoza joins us. He's director of the Henry Jackson Society. Good evening, Alan.
Good evening.
It's quite a remarkable thing to say, isn't it, from the head of MI6, one of the most respected people across the intelligence services, to say, "Come on, Russia, come on in. My door's open. If you want to work with us, collaborate with us in the war against Russia, then come on in."
Well, it sounds strange, but that's what our spy agencies do. They are always looking for people defecting from, rogue regimes, difficult regimes, to give the human intelligence part of spying its basis. You've got to have spies, don't you, in order to have spying.
Is this just a very vocal job advert then?
It's a very vocal job advert, and obviously what it's being designed to do is to increase the pressure on Russia. The reality is, look, if we look at what's happened intelligence-wise, this war shows how much intelligence, we, the West, have had about what's gone on in Russia. You'll recall at the start, we knew exactly what was happening. We publicized all the information, Russian troops moving here and there. We knew about, or the Americans certainly knew about the Prigozhin mutiny, as it were, possibly before Putin knew about it in terms of how that worked. And over the course, you've seen little pinpricks, haven't you, when it's obvious that there have been Russian sources giving us information. So all this is ramping up, if you like, the psychological games, really, in this conflict, of which there have been many, but it's not reflecting anything that hasn't been reality for a long time.
Yeah, it just feels funny said out loud like that, I suppose. And also it does draw into question whether actually we would trust Russians to spy on our behalf. I mean, I assume that once you get into the detail, of course, they are going to have to go through lots of checks. And yes, this happens already, but I just wonder whether we need to know it in quite so much kind of open detail, I suppose. Time is not on my side, so let me just run on to what we're hearing this evening. And that is that Russia's said that all ships travelling to Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea will be considered carriers of military equipment from tomorrow. This comes, of course, after the suspension of the grain deal, the corridor down the Black Sea to allow grain exports from Ukraine. What do you make of this from Russia, Mike?
Well, it's a very aggressive move.
Alan, Alan, I called you Mike for some silly reason.
That's okay. I'll take the mic. It's an aggressive move. This is an aggressive move, and what this is doing is obviously ramping up the pressure on the Ukrainian economy, which has obviously been suffering for some time. But more than that, it's also, of course, a stab in the back, as I think the Kenyans called it today, to all those countries reliant on Ukrainian grain, and which have seen, of course, food prices skyrocket when the war broke out, when the blockade was first instituted, saw those prices fall when the deal came in. We're told the Russians would honour it, etc. They've let it lapse, and I think the Russians are flexing their muscle in any way they can do right now. They're not winning on the battlefield. They have to do something else. So here they go, attacking grain shipments and trying to make it back into the blockade mentality to try and force Ukraine in that psycho sort of war that I was talking about, to try and force Ukraine back into isolation.
Yeah, there were strikes overnight into today targeting grain terminals, port infrastructure in Black Sea ports in Ukraine. Russia hasn't actually said what the penalty would be if there are ships travelling to Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea. We'll wait and see. I don't know whether you've seen this, but whilst I've got you, Alan, there's been a video emerge that shows Prigozhin, the Wagner mercenary chief, addressing his fighters in Belarus. Have you seen this? What do you make of it? There's been so much speculation, really, about where Prigozhin actually is at the moment.
Yeah, I've not seen the video, but this again doesn't surprise me, because you've probably seen the speculation that and the sort of leaked information that Prigozhin has met with Putin since the debacle. He's been in Russia, he's been in Belarus, etc. What remains entirely unclear is what deal has been done between the two men. What have they actually come up with? Again, you mentioned Richard Moore earlier and his sort of commentary about the Russians. What he also said was that Putin is so weak, he's had to cut a deal with Prigozhin. And think about it this way, after what he did, you'd expect Prigozhin's head to be on the floor somewhere. Instead, he's being, ferried around left and right. He turns up here, he turns up there, he's publicized. The reality is that we are still unclear what's happened. What is very clear, though, is that Putin is weak. He's had to, in a sense, clearly rehabilitate this guy who mutinied against him. What that means longer term, we don't know yet. But that's the reality of the situation as is right now.